Good afternoon. Today we're commemorating an event that was critical in an important time in the American Revolution just before the first significant battle occurred. I'm going to briefly talk about the historical context and what Paul Revere actually did on that night. Then I'm going to describe the author of the poem, and I'll read his 7-minute poem. Paul Revere's ride was a critical element of a key event in a long process that was provoked by a series of British actions to strip the colonists of participation in setting taxes, making laws, and administering justice. The letters on the timeline here refer to the dated descriptions below. You've probably heard of all of them, so I'm not going to get into those particularly, but this slide sort of shows how they fit together in a timeline that goes over 2 years from 1774 to the middle of 1776. It started very simply. The colonists refused to accept taxes and other measures imposed by Parliament. They developed a series of acts of resistance, such as the Boston Tea Party and stealing guns from the British arsenals. In response, Britain disbanded the Massachusetts Council. They appointed General Thomas Gage as military governor of Massachusetts and sent 4,000 British redcoats to keep order in the area around Boston. In response to that, the colonists elected John Hancock as provisional governor and started collecting military weapons just in case they might need them later. In response to that, General Gage decided to send 800 British soldiers to seize two different things. In Lexington, they were going to seize John Hancock, who was staying overnight there, along with John Adams. In Concord, they were going to seize a collection of weapons that the colonists had stored there. This is a timeline of the ride. We're going to go A, B, C, and D, the letters that are scattered around the screen. The Patriot leaders knew that the British were planning a raid, but they weren't sure where it was going to go or exactly when it was going to happen. So they secured two riders, Paul Revere and William Dawes, to warn John Hancock and John Adams in Lexington and to prevent the capture of the arms in Concord. When Patriot spies found out that the British troops were going to be taken by small boats to Lechmere Point in Cambridge, they lit two lanterns in the tower of the Old North Church as a signal. And you probably heard this when you took a history course in high school. Paul Revere saw that signal from across the bay in Charlestown. He rode through several towns, and while he did that, he warned the militia counties there, and those sent out additional riders to carry the message further. At 1 a.m. in Lexington, he warned Hancock and Adams, and then he had something to eat. William Dawes took the only road out of Boston. It's on the south side, as you can see, but he didn't warn anybody on his way to Lexington. He got to Lexington after Revere did, and he joined Revere. They planned to ride to Concord. Along the way, they met Samuel Prescott, who was coming home from a visit to his fiancée. This is 1 o'clock in the morning, mind you. He knew many local people, so he offered to help warn people in Concord. All of a sudden, a British patrol appeared and stopped the three of them. Dawes created diversion by racing off, and a couple of the patrol chased after him for a while. After he lost the ones that were chasing him, his horse became lame, and he didn't do anything further with respect to warning anyone. Meanwhile, Prescott got away, and he was able to get to Concord and to warn the militia there, and had them ring the church bell, which woke up a lot of people and got them started gathering. Paul Revere was set free by the British patrol after a while, but the British kept his horse, so he was unable to warn anybody else. He walked back to Lexington, and he arrived there after the shooting occurred there. In the following day, more people arrived from farther away, and Boston was under siege for 11 months. And I missed a page. So let's go back to the other page. And one can say about this, well, so what? So Revere warned a few people, and Prescott warned a few people, and some of those rode off to spread the alarm farther than the villages of Middlesex County. In the hours before the first shots were fired at Concord, and we'll get back to the first shots business a little while later, many villages farther away received the alarm, assembled their militias, and started marching toward Concord. The 800 British Redcoats were on the main road near Lexington at 5 a.m. About half of them were sent into town to capture Hancock and Adams, but they found 70 militiamen there, 7 of whom were shot dead while obeying an order to disperse. No British died at this point. The British then went on to Concord, and they sent 220 men to guard the Old North Bridge. Meanwhile, 400 militia from the area were gathering in the area outside of Concord. When they saw smoke in the town, they marched to the Old North Bridge. The British fired a volley, killing 2 people, and the militia fired back, killing 3. And hence this is considered to be the first shot, or the shot hurled around the world, because in this case, the militia were firing and killing British. The British retreated from the bridge area, and they went into town, and they then spent 3 hours searching for weapons. They felt safe because they outnumbered the militia that they had encountered. They didn't find very much in the village because most of the weapons had been moved out after the alarm. As the militia numbers grew around Concord, there was more firing at the British, who left Concord and retreated toward Lexington. There, the Redcoats were joined by 800 reinforcements that were sent from Boston that had heard that there was trouble out there in the Lexington-Concord area. There were now 1,600 regulars. Militias from farther away now continued to arrive, and by the time the British got back to Boston, over 4,000 militia were engaging the British column. In the following days, more militia arrived from farther away. Boston was under siege for 11 months, and finally, the British left Boston and Massachusetts, never to return. So what should you remember? Without those first few messengers, there would have been no regional militia at Old North Bridge, and today our United States might be loyal provinces of Canada. Think about that. Okay, let's talk about Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the author of this. He was the person who, by the time he wrote this poem, had acquired a reputation internationally, and many of his poems continued to be used in the schools in this country for many years, one of them being A Psalm of Life. And many of you have heard this, life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. One of the many stanzas in this poem. He also wrote Evangeline, which is a very long poem, which is a tale of Acadia. He was a committed abolitionist, and Paul Revere's, as it happens, Ride was published on about the same week as South Carolina seceded from the Union. And Longfellow, during this time of great contention within the country, was trying to bring people back to the origins of the country and why it was we were gathering together to support freedom. So now let me read the poem. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church tower as a signal light. One, if by land, and two, if by sea. And I, on the opposite shore, shall be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar silently rowed, R-O-W-E-D, to the Charlestown shore. Just as the moon rose over the bay, there, swinging wide at her moorings, lay the Somerset, British man of war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friend, Revere's friend, through alley and street wanders and watches with eager ears, till, in the silence around him, he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms, the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed to the tower of the Old North Church, up the wooden stairs with stealthy tread, to the belfry tower overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the somber rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade. By the trembling ladder steep and tall, to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and to look down for a moment on the roofs of the town and the moonlight flowing over all. Beneath, in the churchyard, lay the dead, in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind as it sped, creeping along from tent to tent and seeming to whisper, all is well. A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and of the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed on the landscape far and near, then, impetuous, stamped the earth and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the Old North Church as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer, and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes, till full in his sight a second light in the belfry burns. A hurry of hoofs in the village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath, from the pebbles, in passing, a spark, struck out by a steed that flies fearless and fleet. That was all. And yet, through the gloom and the light, The fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with his heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic, meeting the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock, when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises when the sun goes down. It was won by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting house windows, blank and bare, gazed at him with a spectral glare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown, and one was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest. In the books you have read how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. And so, through the night rode Paul Revere. And so, through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For, born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. That ends the poem, ends my talk this afternoon. If you've got any questions, be happy to answer them. I need to leave shortly to go to another talk on the American Revolution in another city, but I have a few minutes to answer questions here. Thank you. It's okay, you may clap.